Hello, everyone. Just a quick editorial video today, hopefully a quick one, to talk about some stuff that happened on Hotline League this week, and then some conversation I've seen happen afterwards. Of course, this video is sponsored by Alienware, and we're doing a survey right now. TGI is doing a survey about some LCS viewership trends for a different video. That link will be in the description if you want to check it out. But let's get into this. So first off, I just want to put it out there that I do not hate Amateur or Academy. Basically this past week on Hotline League, a frequent caller, Tom Shu, who tends to be combative in a good way, called in to say that he was disappointed that Riot did not do, or the LCS did not do a lot to promote Proving Grounds, which is the new Amateur Academy event that is happening this year, and is happening this week, assuming I get this posted in the beginning of April. And Primal was our guest. I want to say that everything I'm saying here in this video is just my opinion, not necessarily Primal's, as I'm mentioning him. But he and I both had the opinion that Riot did not miss out on an opportunity to promote Proving Grounds. That this is not something that they should really be worried about too much, because we both kind of felt that viewership should not be a goal of amateur and academy events. That instead it should be more on development. Now, here's where I want to apologize, or perhaps not apologize, but at least admit that I made this mistake in trying to talk about what is a nuanced topic that is very deeply, a lot of people are very deeply passionate about on Hotline League, with a caller who was like the type of caller that you kind of go back and forth with a ton. I've made this mistake before on Hotline League, where it's like the first time I've talked about something there, and I don't always do the best job of treating the subject with the respect or broad coverage that it deserves. And so because of that, I got called two-faced on Reddit, and people were saying that they completely regret giving me subs and that I don't actually care about NA development. There were other people who were saying that, you know, I damage personalities like me that say things like this, damage development in North America and all this stuff. People were very angry about it, I guess is the way I should say. Obviously not like tons and tons of people, but enough that I felt like I wanted to sort of explain this. So look, I want to put this out there. Obviously, I care a lot about amateur and academy. Just think about it from a pragmatic standpoint, right? Even if you did not think that I cared about just LCS in and of itself, and maybe I'm just this like callous business person who's running a media empire. From a pragmatic standpoint, I am incentivized to want there to be a great pipeline of talent and development in North America, because look, as much as I love the import players and think there are some great personalities among them and wouldn't, trade out a ton of them, it's generally the case that you get a lot more fandom around North American players who are doing great and have great personalities and etc. People generally tend to gravitate to those players. I think, DeMonte is an example of a player who's a North American mid. People have been really excited about him throughout his career, even though like he's had a lot of ups and downs and that type of stuff, right? So it's helpful for me. Also, it's a lot easier for me to create content with those folks, in part because during breaks they don't go travel to different countries where they're from. They are, there's less of a language barrier in some cases, right? Like I have reasons for wanting this. There's no world in which I would just not care about this. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think a lot of people for some reason think I don't care, when in reality, like, it's very clear that I have every reason to, even beyond the fact that I just am generally a fan of the LCS and North American talent, and would like it to be a situation where we're not succeeding internationally with teams of 5 imported players, By the way, part of the reason why I cared a lot about the import discussion and why I raised it and continue to hammer on that for so long. It is surprising to me that even though I did all that, people don't believe that I care. So what is it really then? Well, the reason why I'm butting heads with these people, or I have these disagreements, not because I don't care about amateur and academy, but because there's a big philosophical difference between what I think on this topic and what other people think on this topic. So that difference is that I do not think that we need good viewership for there to be good development. People think like it is very important for people to watch Academy and Amateur, and that is the only way that we're going to create a good pipeline. But I just don't think that's the case. And I think it's very, very important that we realize that these are two different things. That viewership and people watching Proving Grounds is not the same as us developing players. You could hold that event, and if you have 100,000 people watching it, it's not going to get you necessarily a better player than if you have 100 people watching it. Now, I get it. It's a little nuanced because, like, okay, well, maybe you can sell some sponsors. Maybe there's more reasons for people to invest into it and all that stuff. But on the whole, like, a player competing in front of more viewers is not going to make that player a better player. So let's take a couple steps back and understand why it is that I think having viewership or expecting viewership to be big for this type of stuff is a flawed idea. Now, we talked about this a little bit on Hotline League, but one of the biggest things that happened this year was that for most weeks of the year, we added 50% more viewing hours to the LCS. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't say viewing hours. Viewable hours, right? There's 50% more content if all you care about is the broadcast, because we now have 3 games or 3 days of 5 games instead of just 2, or how they broke it up last year. That has a dramatic impact on how much time people will watch other LCS stuff or other league content or whatever. Because like all you need to do is think about this from the perspective of the average viewer. Previously, if you were like, hey, average viewer, please watch LCS. They're like, okay, I just need to watch 10 hours of that. I can fit that into my schedule. Or maybe they watch 8 or 9 or something like that. Now we are asking people to watch 15 hours. Probably a little bit more than that if you include things like countdown or whatever, like some pauses. Like the broadcast can go a bit longer than that. That is pretty high considering how many hours people have in a week. Then you have stuff like LPL is coming over. They've been clearly doing a pretty big attempt at growing their English audience. You see them posting on the subreddit. You see them doing their English broadcast. They're doing a lot of stuff. They have I think a Western or English YouTube channel now. They've been making attempts for that. A lot of people really like watching LCK. There's a ton of people that watch LEC every week. And so what you have is you have a lot of these other leagues that have higher production, that have more talented players in them and a better gameplay. You have all this stuff happening, and that is also competing with LCS. Finally, like I've been covering this stuff for a very, very long time, and I can tell you Academy content does not get very many views. And I get a little frustrated because some people say like, oh, well, that's because Riot hasn't tried to make this big. That's just not true at all. They were previously integrating it into the LCS broadcast. You would have Academy games that would play after LCS days or like before or whatever. They frequently literally did. I don't know what more you could do to promote this stuff than literally taking the LCS games and feeding them into amateur stuff. And on the whole, the majority of people do not care about that stuff. They don't want to watch it. They aren't interested in it, etc. Again, I get that there are people that are watching this right now who care very passionately about these players and about these teams. But I would ask them to look more broadly and realize that they are not representative of the average viewer, that perhaps they are more invested in League of Legends esports competitively, or perhaps they have other reasons for caring about the amateur and academy scenes. I just do not think that over time we have seen any sign that we're going to be able to ever get a lot of people to watch academy and amateur. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some formula out there, but that is why I am at the place where I'm at on viewership and my opinions there. So one of my biggest concerns here, and one of the reasons why I think it's actually damaging to say that we need to get a lot of people to watch academy and amateur, is because if you take in your mind and you think, hey, we're never going to get to a place where like we've got 20 or 30K people watching this stuff. And again, by the way, part of the problem is people don't really ever talk about what numbers these things need to have in order for them to feel like it's a success. So I would say, you know, if you can get 20 to 30K people watching frequently, consistently, that would be huge. But some people, I think, might want less. Regardless, in a world where you make viewership one of your biggest priorities, or you feel like it is very important to have great viewership on these things, I think you can do significant damage to the development of academy and amateur players in the long term, because what ends up happening is you have people invest believing that this is going to succeed from a viewership perspective in the long term. And while that can be great in the short term, because suddenly you've got people that are building these leagues and building these amateur teams and building, you know, hiring coaches from other regions or from this region or anything like that, and spending a lot of money in the expectations that this is someday going to get to a level where like, oh, now I've got this like great team that's getting, you know, all these views on these big tournaments that people are watching and tuning into. Well, when that doesn't end up happening next year or the year after, you end up in a world where that system collapses. And by the way, it's really important to note that when we had that conversation on Hotline League, we were coming off of a call, and I think a lot of people don't know this because maybe they only watched that clip or whatever, where we had just been talking about my concerns about LCS viewership struggling and LCS viewership going down. And so that is part of the reason why my sentiment is that we should be prioritizing building up Academy and Amateur, LCS viewership before we get to Academy and Amateur. Because in a world where I'm like, oh my God, our matches, you know, the first match of our weekend had like 34K viewers on the main channel and some on Double If's co-stream as well. I very much am like, we should be doing everything we can to prop up the LCS, because in a world where the LCS viewership keeps sliding, we're going to have far bigger issues than Academy and Amateur viewership. There's no reason to have development leagues in a world where LCS is collapsing. So that is one of my biggest concerns, is like I actively worry about the way that this stuff has been positioned. I mean, people do not, I think, realize that Riot charges these tournaments a license fee to run some of these Academy Amateur tournaments, and how much money it costs to get into this. And like, when you have a sponsor that is being sold into this and people are like, oh, well, it's going to get 10K or 15K or 20K views, I don't know what they're selling it at, and then that sponsor sees the number being significantly lower, it's just like, there's a world where by setting our expectations and goals on viewership, you end up building a system wherein people end up disappointed and pull out, and the stuff suffers. So I do want to make a couple call outs here, which is, I get that if you work in Academy or Amateur or heavily invest in this, or you're a player or something like that, you hear me talk about this stuff and you get frustrated because you really want there to be great viewership, and you are spending a ton of your week every week working on building this stuff. You know, maybe you've convinced investors or sponsors or anything like that, and me saying this sounds really bad to you. So I apologize if that's the case, because I have a lot of respect for the people that are working in this stuff. It is not often glamorous. You're often working with a lot of shitty people who don't pay their players, and you know, like it is a lot of work. You're not making a ton of money. In some cases, you're probably not making any money. And it is really fantastic that people are willing to dedicate themselves to this. But hopefully you can understand, using the reasoning that I've provided, that I like why I philosophically disagree with you, and also not think that I don't give a shit about development, or that I'm two-faced, or you know, something like that for having this opinion. The other thing I do want to call it is, for the people that are working in this stuff, I think that Amateur and Academy can be a great pipeline, not just for the players, but also for the talent that casts the stuff and who work on the stuff and do interviews. I think it would be great for the people who want to work in media and do stuff similar to what I do, or Tim, or the other folks that I work with, that, you know, maybe they can start covering this stuff. I think, managers, coaches, all sorts of people can start in this area and grow and become very valuable people to the LCS and the broader league ecosystem over time. So I think there's a lot of value in this stuff. Again, I just disagree that this is something that we should all be working to grow the tons of viewership for, because I just don't think that's going to work. One thing I do want to call out is that somebody on Reddit said hey, you can spend 5 minutes of this on the broadcast. Countdown is just talking. What do they say? This is doing yet another boring ass stat comparison between players really that important. I can't argue with that, right? I think there's a lot of time where the LCS broadcast just feels like they're filling time, or they're doing something that I don't think is necessarily that captivating, or is quite honestly building the players, the brands, the narratives in a meaningful way. And so in that world we're in, I guess, sure, it at that point in time, I don't think that they're doing much to help build LCS viewership. And so why not just talk about amateur stuff or academy stuff, because you probably just have a bunch of people waiting on stream just for you to get to the next game, because they're not necessarily being entirely invested in what you're showing them. But I guess what I would say is I'd much rather us look at that not as an opportunity to promote amateur and academy because we think that segment is boring, but an opportunity for us to put a segment in where we can actually get people to invest more and care more about the teams that we have in the LCS. I mean, for God's sakes, people don't care about probably half of the players in the LCS or the teams, at least not in a big way. We have to get people to actually give a shit about the players and the teams and the narratives that are happening in the LCS, I think, before we can start to really try to push them into academy and amateur. So anyway, again, hopefully this helps explain stuff. I apologize to the people that I offended. I think development is very important for the league and for the future of it. I just don't think that development is going to come with a ton of views, and I really worry about a world in which we're making that stuff the priority. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Maybe you'll dislike this video. Maybe you'll like it. Hopefully you can respect it either way. What is your favorite type of pie? Well, if you answered cherry, and even if you didn't answer cherry, boy, do I have some good news for you. Alienware has now done the first ever mechanical keyboard laptop situation as a collaboration with Cherry. So when you guys hear about Cherry keys or whatever, you can now get those on as an upgrade, an optional upgrade, on the M15 and M17 laptops. It's just got announced this week as I'm filming this outro. So go check them out over at alienware.com/Travis. There's a link in the description below. But it's kind of cool because, a lot of people, they don't, especially gamers, they want that kind of mechanical feel. And now you can actually get that in a laptop, which normally you can't. So it's really cool that Alienware has been able to do this with Cherry. You can go find out more information about it on the Alienware site. And I had thought about getting some cherry pie and eating it in this outro. And then I just I didn't get around to it. And sometimes I worry about my lack of commitment to really making these outros as great as I envision them to be.